that it will deter any acts of aggression by any other nation or anyone else. Perhaps someday in the future there will be a magical moment when the countries of the world will get together to eliminate their nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, we are not there yet, sadly.
Well, joining us now from Seoul, CNN's Will Ripley, and in San Francisco, Executive Director of the Ploughshares Fund, Philip Yoon. Here in Los Angeles, we have Democratic strategist Caroline Heldman and talk radio host and Trump supporter John Phillips. Good to see you all. We'll start with Will, though, in Seoul. So, Will, just after the president called for this build-up of the U.S. military, we heard him talking about there will be no complacency, there will be no concessions when it comes to the North Koreans. You put it all together, how will this be heard in Pyongyang?
Not good. This is the bottom line. This is, in many ways, this State of the Union speech kind of drives the knife in further for the North Koreans, who have already been quite agitated, and they have expressed their agitation through their state media reports over the last week or so. They already canceled an inter-Korean cultural event ahead of the Olympics, upset about the tone of the coverage of the North Korean participation in the Olympics. And now I am learning from sources, diplomatic sources with deep knowledge of North Korea's intentions, that they will be having a military parade next week, and in that parade they are expected to display many dozens of Hwasong-15 intercontinental ballistic missiles, the kind of which they recently tested, the kind of missile that could potentially strike anywhere on the U.S. mainland. In addition to that, there will be hundreds of missiles and rockets on display. This is coming from two different sources, again with close knowledge of North Korea's activities. And of course, one of the sources saying the intent of this is to, and I'm reading a quote here, scare the hell out of the Americans. This is not a good sign for the situation here on the peninsula. The North Koreans are upset about the U.S. military buildup, the president's ambiguity about whether the United States might engage in a preemptive military strike could also push the North to take further steps. My sources are not ruling out the possibility of another North Korean missile test, quote, in the very near future. And of course, the unknown here, how the United States would respond to all of this. And given the fact that President Trump also put a North Korean defector very prominently, sitting him right next to the First Lady of the United States, holding up his crutches that, were as a result of injuries sustained defecting from North Korea, that is also just going to further agitate this government, which has already been expressing its deep displeasure and hinting that more inter-Korean Olympics events could be canceled, and that all bets are really off about what's going to happen here. And of course, we also know that the U.S.-South Korea joint military drills that have been postponed till after the games, they will resume. And North Korea has said that there would be grave consequences if those drills do go forward.
Will, thank you. Will there for us live in Seoul. I want to go over to Philip now. And just on Will's point there about this North Korean defector who attended the State of the Union, obviously a clear message being sent to Pyongyang. The president actually finished the State of the Union address with the story of Hee Sung-ho. This is part of what he said.
Sung-ho traveled thousands of miles on crutches all across China and Southeast Asia to freedom. Most of his family followed. His father was caught trying to escape and was tortured to death. Today, he lives in Seoul, where he rescues other defectors and broadcasts into North Korea what the regime fears most: the truth. Today, he has a new leg, but Sung-ho, I understand you still keep those old crutches as a reminder of how far you've come. Your great sacrifice is an inspiration to us all.
So some have said, Phil, that this, making the comparisons, that this is, a lot like 2002, George W. Bush in the lead up to the Iraq War, the infamous Axis of Evil State of the Union address. And it matters because of, where it is said, the context and the place, because before, he was praising Sung-ho, he was also talking about this evil dictatorship, this country which cannot be, the world cannot tolerate for much longer.
So yeah, there are clear parallels, I would think, with the Iraq War and the lead up to it. I'm really troubled by the State of the Union speech. I think the context of this also is the recent report by the Washington Post that Victor Cha, who was supposed to become the U.S. ambassador to South Korea, basically is not going to be nominated because he disagreed with the U.S. policies towards North Korea. And essentially he then wrote an op-ed that the punch in the nose, the preemptive limited strike, was something that he pushed back on, did not agree with strongly. So this is making me worried that this is something that's really being considered. The second thing is use of Mr. Xi. He's on record, from what I understand, of being for regime change, that this regime in North Korea, however repulsive it is, he's on record saying this regime needs to be overthrown. And that will not be overlooked by the North Koreans by him being featured so prominently.
And just with regards to Victor Cha, I mean, he was around in the George W. Bush days. He's seen as one of the most preeminent experts on North Korea. But, you know, he's no shrinking violet. He also has kind of fairly hawkish views as well, right? And so if you have this guy saying, hey, listen, you know, the bloody nose, a limited military strike, that's not a good idea, but this administration then freezes this guy out. Again, you know, you put it all together, and we're getting to quite a dangerous place.
Well, that's really worrisome, because I just don't know. I mean, within the policy realm here, Victor is very solid. He knows his stuff. I don't know if you're going to find anybody who is within the policy mainstream who really agrees with the use of force. It's not an option. And the fact that they're going to have to find somebody who agrees with that, with the possibility of unilateral strike. There was also reported in the Financial Times that they asked him if he was prepared to manage an evacuation, which is a precursor to a strike. And so I think this is quite worrisome. You know, this war, if it does break out, it risks war, could really result in tens of thousands, not hundred thousands, possibly 1 million casualties, not only in the United States, but really in South Korea and Japan, which would bear the brunt of something going out of control. This is terrifying.
Very quickly, when you hear talk about, you know, evacuations, and will he be prepared to work on that, does this sort of say to you that this planning is a lot further down the track than we may have thought so?
Well, I think this planning is always in the track. I mean, the military builds on contingencies. That's what they do. That's their job. The question is, how do we prevent from all this from happening? And so I'm not surprised that they are talking that this has been planned. I am surprised that they decided that they weren't going to have Victor, who is very well known, very well respected in Republican circles, because he disagreed with the proposals or the policies that the administration, the Trump administration, had. So that's very worrisome. That just tells you where they are and what direction they're possibly going. And the speech itself, if you look at it, in itself is fairly innocuous. Other presidents have said very singular language, but when you put it in this context, you can tell that it is leading up to a case for some kind of military action, particularly with respect to Otto Warmbier and the emotional heartstrings that pulls at. It's just an awful situation that would happen to him as well.
Okay. Philip, thank you. We appreciate you being with us. Carol, I just want to bring you on this because, you know, that's 2002 State of the Union, one of the, you know, it's gone down in history as one of the most infamous State of the Union addresses in recent memory. Do you see the parallels here between what Trump is doing, trying to sell a wall, which is what Bush was doing back in 2002?
I think it's obvious, right? It's a rhetorical buildup, if you will, and his decision to withdraw the nomination of someone because he doesn't want to go in and enact regime change is evidence of that. I also think it's just hypocrisy to talk about this defector from North Korea and talk essentially about chain migration, right? His parents coming over as well, without mentioning the fact that we don't allow refugees from North Korea. So both the hypocrisy and the buildup, I think, were troubling in Trump's speech.
Yeah, there was an executive order in September last year which banned North Koreans. But John, what's your take?
I totally disagree. I think it's par for the course. Trump is talking tough, and we're seeing saber rattling from Kim Jong-un. He can have a parade. He can have a big inflatable Snoopy and Santa Claus and Al Roker doing play-by-play. It's not going to change the global dynamic that the UN has passed the toughest sanctions on North Korea to date. We've also seen North Korea and South Korea talking for the first time in ages, and we've seen the Chinese leaning on the North Koreans like they haven't in a very long time. Whatever Trump is doing, people may not like it, people may not like the rhetorical devices that he uses, but it's working.
All right. We thank you for that. We're going to hit pause on the front of North Korea.